Let me thank you for being here today. First, let me thank and acknowledge Representative Billy Mitchell, one of the leaders of the legislature, who's been in the forefront on a lot of major causes in this state, especially those which impact the African American community. All of us will agree, and I think there's common consensus, that the June primary here in Georgia was an absolute debacle. You had people waiting in line hours to vote. Many instances, polls opened late and closed late. We had situations where people arrived and voting machines did not work. There are a lot of people who came to cast their ballot who could not because they had to go back to work and could not stand in long lines. In November, we'll be coming upon our national election, and it is estimated that there would be 3 times as many people voting in November as voted in June. And we've come today to make it clear that the African American community and its faith leaders are not going to sit by and have a rerun in November of what happened in June. There is no reasonable explanation for what happened in June. There is no credible explanation for why you had less polling sites in the urban areas of this state than you had in the suburban and rural areas of this state. It is no coincidence that again and again these problems happen in predominantly minority communities. So we've come today to say to the state of Georgia, particularly the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, that we are offering our churches all across the state of Georgia to be polling sites, and that we will recruit and have to be trained as poll workers. Those who constitute millennials in this state, we have a large number of millennials, younger people, who can be trained to serve as poll workers. The excuse we got in June was that they did not have enough polling sites, and they did not have enough poll workers because most of the poll workers were senior citizens, those who were susceptible to the coronavirus, and that was their explanation as to what happened. We do not want those explanations, better yet, those excuses in November. It is clear already that November is going to be a very controversial election. You already have the man who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue already seeking to say that this election is rigged, an election which has not yet been held. He is already saying that write-in ballots should not be held, even though he himself and members of his family vote that way. But we want to make it clear that we want our churches to be used, our churches will be open, and our people are available to be trained to be poll workers. Now, let me also say that I am very concerned because according to the Constitution, the Secretary of State in Georgia is responsible for the conduct of elections in this state. We have sent a letter, which the media had a copy of. We sent him a letter offering our churches and offering to get volunteers to be trained to be poll workers. In addition, yesterday I called the Secretary of State's office because not only did we mail him the letter, but also wanted to email him the letter and to seek to set up a meeting with the Secretary of State to discuss this matter. One of his staff people consistently said, you don't need to meet with the Secretary of State. This is a matter for county election authorities. Go through the counties. My response to her was the Secretary of State, on the basis of the Constitution, is responsible for the oversight of elections in Georgia. And to be sure that I was correct, I went and looked it up. And it said the Secretary of State's office organizes and oversees all election activity, including voter registration, municipal, state, county, and federal elections. That's the responsibility of the Secretary of State. And so I am troubled. I am very troubled that this Secretary of State, who has authority to be responsible, does not want to take responsibility for the conduct of elections in this state. In the June primary, with all the problems, he blamed it on county election officials. And he is true, they do bear some responsibility. But the Secretary of State's office should have seen before election day that each county had enough polling sites, they had enough machines, that the machines worked, that they had enough poll workers. And so again, we're going to insist on a meeting with the Secretary of State. We're sending a letter, and we'll be meeting with a number of the county election officials, especially in Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, and other counties around Clayton, those counties that surround Atlanta, because we refuse to have the same problems in November that we had in June. In addition to that, we're going to be urging our members to vote early and to vote by absentee ballot. Because in the midst of this pandemic, we do not want our elderly, we do not want those with underlying conditions to have to be standing in lines. We do not want people to have to jeopardize their health in order to cast their ballot. But even already I have some concern. A little less than a month ago, I sent in an application for an absentee ballot. As of today, almost a month later, I still have not received my own absentee ballot, which means even if it comes today or tomorrow, I will be crazy to put that ballot in the mail. The way mail moves in Georgia, it will be November when it arrives. And so therefore, the only way I can get my ballots counted, I'm going to have to drive it to the Fulton County election office nearest to where I live. And there is no telling how many people find themselves in the same situation I find myself in today. So there are a lot of questions as it relates to this election, and we in the African American community, faith leaders, the ACLU, Fair Fight, we refuse to sit back and wait till this calamity happens and then listen to a lot of sad explanations which make absolutely no sense. I'm pleased to have with me today Reverend Timothy McDonald, pastor of the Iconium Baptist Church in Atlanta, has some remarks, and then we will hear from the ACLU and then Fair Fight, Georgia. Reverend McDonald. Yes. Whoops. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, Bishop Jackson. Voter suppression is real in Georgia. It's real across the nation. Voter suppression has become sophisticated now. As the bishop stated, ultimately it is the responsibility of the Secretary of State's office to oversee elections. The state of Georgia does not have a good record when it comes to managing voting across this state. We're on the lawsuit right now. We saw in the primary election that citizens were willing to stand in the rain, stand in the heat, stand for hours without water because they believe in the democratic process. The citizens of Georgia know and understand the value of voting. And it behooves us to see that our state, the governor who was the former Secretary of State, does not understand how serious voting is for the citizens of Georgia. First Iconium Baptist Church has been a voting site for more than 20 years, my church. We have made sure that everything was convenient, that everything was set up, that everything was in order, that volunteers have been secured, and there would be no problems on election day. It works when churches are involved. It works when pastors are involved. It works when our members are ready to help and to assist and to volunteer. We've been doing it for over 20 years. You can check the record, and we've never had a problem. Our churches are ready to serve. Our churches are open. Our churches have volunteers, young and older. And we want to make sure that the citizens of Georgia has as easy a process to cast their ballots as possible. Voter suppression is real. Bishop gave a personal account. Let me share with you one as well. I've never voted absentee. I've always voted either early and in person on election day. But because of the coronavirus this year, my wife and I decided we'd try absentee. We both filled out our application at the same time. We both put them in the mail. I took them to the mail at the same time. I got my application. My wife never got her application. For this runoff election, I got my application. My wife has not gotten her application. So we're going in person to early vote. Today, this afternoon, for us, it's another form of voter suppression. That is happening in other families. We're not the only family that situation exists for. And so we're urging our Secretary of State, who gives the impression that he wants to do the right thing, that he would do the right thing. Work with the ministers across this state. Work with the elected officials across this state. And let's make voting a democratic process where people don't have to stand in line for hours. That absentee voting is real and that it is operating in a fashion that is conducive to enhance our democratic process. Let us not play games with people's vote. Lastly, the state of Georgia is under a microscope. The eyes of the nation are going to be on this state. We're the only state in the history of the United States now that has 2 Senate races at the same time. So much has happened in our Senate that has hurt people of color. We think it's just the president? No way. The Senate continues, even now, as they discuss the stimulus and the stalemate, and they hold back. We need to ensure that Georgia comes through with flying colors. We need to make sure that for once Georgia looks good after an election has been had. We need to make sure that every mechanism is in place so that the citizens will be able to cast their vote and to have their votes counted. John Lewis fought all his life for this right and this privilege. The nation is thinking about him now. C.T. Vivian now. Dr. Lowry now, who fought for, Andy Young, the right to vote for all citizens, not just black citizens, for all citizens to have the right to vote. This is not about party, it's about principle. And we're here to offer ourselves, churches, pastors, our members, our volunteers. We believe that a meeting should be had with the Secretary of State, and we can have that meeting either by invite or we can have it any other way. It's the Secretary of State's call. But when clergy asks for a meeting, we will have a meeting, one way or the other. We're here to offer ourselves to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Bishop Jackson for raising his voice on behalf of democracy. It's an important historical moment. We are 55 years from the voting rights marches of Selma, which originated in the Brown Chapel AME Church. And so this call is issued in the spirit of the civil rights movement, that all are welcome. People of every faith, people of no faith, gathered at Brown Chapel to stand for voting rights, to stand shoulder to shoulder and march from Selma to Montgomery to achieve this Voting Rights Act. We are 100 years from women's suffrage, and still we are working for our voting rights. So the ACLU is here to stand with all Georgians. Georgians want to vote. The primary turnout was up 275%, even with all of the problems and delays. We are encouraging Georgians to vote early, to use mail-in ballots. And Bishop, we are fighting to make sure that there are drop boxes, because we understand that the mail has been slowed down and that people may get their ballot. People need to be able to put their ballots in a drop box on election day, no later than election day. We're calling on people to be a part of solution, as you are hearing today. Don't curse the darkness, light a candle. Our website, acluga.org, has resources to connect voters, to check their registrations, to request absentee ballots, to get videos on how to fill out your absentee ballots, demonstrations on how to return the ballot, to check all of the election dates for elections and early voting, the locations of drop boxes in their community. And we are calling, as the bishop said, for folks who can to step up to be poll workers, to take that important civic responsibility in your community to guarantee that every Georgian who chooses to vote is able to cast their ballot safely and have that ballot counted in November for this very critical election. Thank you.
Say your name.
I'm sorry, I'm Andrea Young. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Georgia.
Say your name and organization.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hillary Hawley, and I'm the Organizing Director for Fair Fight Action. Thank you. We like you. I want to say thank you to Bishop Jackson for having us and including Fair Fight Action today. So in 2018, we saw a mess of an election when Fair Fight Action and over 500 churches, or AME churches, joined a lawsuit to sue the state for failing to do its job. They actually tried to kick us out of court, saying that it was not the Secretary of State's job to administer and promote and make sure that we have the uniformity of elections in the state of Georgia. Luckily, our judge agreed with us that it is in fact their job. So then, after that, we see a massive voter purge here in the state of Georgia, where Fair Fight Action, the ACLU of Georgia, and many other organizations had to use so many resources to ensure that people who should not be on the voter purge were not to be purged. And then we turn around and see the state of Georgia, the Secretary of State's office, promotes a piece of legislation that would want to remove their responsibilities to make sure that we have uniformity in all of Georgia's 159 counties. And yet, that bill failed after the enormous amount of advocacy and resources that we had to divert to ensure that the Secretary of State remains responsible and is ordered to, in fact, do his job. And so then now, today, we hear that he's refusing to meet with leaders of 500 black churches in the state of Georgia, who is offering resources, capacity, staff, and volunteers to help our elections. And we also have an Attorney General of the state of Georgia who signed on to an amicus brief to gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, the very Voting Rights Act that John Lewis fought for. And when his body was laid to rest in the rotunda right in front of us, they were honoring his life, but yet are trying to actively destroy his legacy. So I come here today on behalf of Verify Action to stand with the ACLU of Georgia, to stand with the elected officials who actually care and are fighting for our democracy, and to stand with clergy members and Bishop Jackson to say we are here to help. We are here to help the state because like the gentleman said, Georgia, it's all eyes on us. I cannot get in my car for a single day and turn on the radio without hearing about the failures of elections in Georgia. We are an embarrassment. It will impact our business community, and Georgia loves to say that we are number one for business. But if we don't have a representative government, we're also going to see businesses suffer because that allows leaders who do not care about the livelihoods of workers to be elected. So there's a lot at stake this year. And so I just want to say thank you for those standing with me, and thank you for those who are watching, who care and are willing to help. And if you ever need anything, Verify Action is here, along with the ACLU of Georgia and the clergy members. Thank you so much.
Reverend Gerald Durley.
My name is Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, former pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church and the Concerned Black Clergy. We come to join in with Verified ACLU, Reverend McDonald, and Bishop Jackson to say that our 500 or 600 churches in the metropolitan area, Concerned Black Clergy, are in support of this. I'm somewhat chagrined. I think back, we thought in 1964 that we had accomplished what we needed to do in fighting for voting. I started in this movement in 1960. I'm 78 years old now, and I find that we're right back to the same place where we are now, coming out. So for all of the churches and all of you who claim to be active members of the church, we've got to get out and vote like we've never voted before. Somewhere I read in antiquity that when I look at that, God did not give us the power of fear, but of a sound mind. And all the commercials I see are laced with fear. Fear to come out. Fear of what would happen if the police are defunded. Fear, fear, fear. But the churches of Georgia now are saying we will not take that fear mongering any longer. So we're all coming together. Mr. Secretary, we're not afraid of you either. So we're going to be here as a conglomerate group to open up our churches, as the bishop has said and others have said, train our people because we're stepping out strong, because this is the most critical election that we've had in our time. So the Concerned Black Clergy of Metropolitan Atlanta stands with our 500 churches in solidarity with all of the other churches around the state of Georgia to make sure that the voting is done properly, that there's no suppression that is going on. We don't have any fear, but we do have a sound mind, and we'll operate out of love.
Thank you. Representative Billy Mitchell. All right. Let me make one final comment. I just happen to be looking around the gallery here, and I see a statue of Stevens over there, who was the vice president of the Confederacy. And I want to just take this time to say to Senator Loeffler, every member of the Georgia Congressional Delegation, except Senator Loeffler, signed a letter that in the rotunda of the United States House of Representatives, that Georgia would take out the statue of Stevens and replace it with a statue of John Lewis. I want to tell Senator Loeffler she needs to come to her senses and do the right thing. Yes, sir. She needs to sign the letter that the statue of the Vice President of the Confederacy, who's placed there by Georgians, needs to come out and put there a statue of Representative John Lewis, a genuine American hero. And also, let me call on Senator Perdue and again Senator Loeffler to support the bill submitted by Congressman Jim Clyburn to make the Voting Rights Act bill, which is before the Congress, name it the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020. I'll take any questions anybody may have. If you questions?
We did a good job.
Thank you so much. Have a great day and be safe.
Girl, you very